Hey everyone, I want to thank you all very, very much for coming. This is super, super important to me personally, and I know it's important to many of you as well. I wanted to kind of open this call with a perspective that the world is changing so quickly and that we're in a completely new time that no one is really 100% prepared for. That makes us sort of trailblazers, and we have an unprecedented opportunity to have an incredibly important impact, even before our GSP journey begins. Even now, people are suffering and dying directly or indirectly from COVID-19, and I'm sure that we can help. And time is definitely of the essence. We're also entering an institution that moves quickly and powerfully. As a current Stanford MSCS student, I've seen no other environment more creative, motivated, and collaborative. Case in point, last night I emailed Dr. Milana Trounce, who is professor at the School of Medicine for Biosecurity and also a GSB alum. And within hours, we've been offered institutional support for networking, branding, and funding by the School of Medicine. Kirsten Moss, who we also all know, is likewise very excited about this initiative and is eager to help us find institutional support from the GSB as we generate ideas and ventures. In my opinion, this is now the time to act. We have an opportunity like no other. So to open the floor, I'd like to first also thank my co-organizers, and they'll introduce themselves, and we'll talk about what interests us in being involved in this kind of thing. And hopefully our perspectives will get you all fired up as well. My name is Josh, and I'm a current Stanford student, MSCS. I'm interested mostly in using technology, emerging technology, to fight against this COVID-19 sickness. I feel like I've learned a lot in school, but a lot of that learning hasn't really been applicable as of yet. And it's finally time to use research to benefit the world in a very powerful way. Anika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, I'm Anika. I'm from Germany, originally also based in Germany at the moment. And why I'm really excited about this opportunity or this project is that I think, especially as terrible and frightening the situation might be at the moment, you see just so much motivation and innovation in different groups, and people really want to get to work and contribute their skill sets. And that's what really fascinates me. And I think the GSB admissions team has already selected all of us based on diversity, on geographies. So I think there could actually be no better group that's to address this than probably all of us together. And the issue I'm mostly working on, or I'm mostly interested in, is the first topic we were posting, the worker allocation, because especially where I'm from in Germany, it's more like a regional area, and we have a lot of small family-led businesses that are really struggling at the moment because they don't really know how to proceed. They have lost a lot of their employees, and they needed to close down. So just giving them the access to technology to actually solve these issues is just really interesting and important to me. So cool. And then let's continue with Julieta. Yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Julieta. I am currently based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So thanks, Josh, for organizing this. As you said, well, the challenge is real. That's probably my main motivation. And like other human problems that we have complete libraries to know how to tackle them, this is something that's brand new. So we have an opportunity to be creative. And of course, as Anika said, with a great group of people that the admissions committee has already selected. Also, as we probably will be discussing endlessly during our first weeks at the GSB, I want to work in impact investment. So all of these initiatives that have a specific impact in our communities and can help people's lives be better are always of interest to me. Especially, I'm interested in local SME support and digital socializing, especially related to mental health issues. So that's from my end. Danielle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle. I'm from Mexico City. I currently work in impact investing. And for me, this is a very exciting opportunity. First, to potentially generate positive impact in communities that really need it right now. And second, I feel like it's kind of a pre-quarter for us, which I think is very exciting as well. For me, a topic that is really relevant right now is how we can take the best practices from countries that have actually been able to battle this pretty well and see what applies and what doesn't apply in developing countries. Something that's been a bit discouraging for me so far is reading all the reports, and a lot of them are not discouraging, but interesting at least, is what they suggest is things that perhaps you can do in Germany or perhaps you can do in Sweden, but in a country like Mexico or Argentina, you can't really keep people at home for 3, 4, 5 weeks because people live day to day. So I really want to work with you guys and figure out the best ways we can actually provide solutions in countries like Mexico and Argentina and many others that have a less developed economy and a more informal economy. So I'm really excited to get to know all of you and figure out the best ways forward.
All right, on to you, Nancy, if you want to chime in.
Hey, can you hear me? Hi guys, I'm Nancy. So I'm currently on leave from Stanford. I'm actually not a GSP student. I am a CS PhD. I work in AI research. And I most recently had left Stanford for a bit to work on a company in sort of the computational genomics space. And I'll be going back to Stanford later this fall. So I think some of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is very similar to Josh, is the ability for us to use technology to really transform how we're going to sort of respond to global crises, black swan events like the recent coronavirus situation. And if you sort of look historically at what's happened over the last 100 years, I grew up in the Bay Area. I've been here pretty much my whole life, and there has never been a single time in history where the economy has shut down for so long. And in response to this, I think there's a lot of opportunities. One is primarily sort of in the genomics space and sort of how do we actually build healthcare infrastructure to better respond to global surveillance epidemics right now in the United States, as well as in the future for new sort of initiatives that are happening. And I myself have, I used to work briefly for the CEO of a large sequencing company called Illumina that does about 90% of the computational genomics in the United States. And they are currently setting up an initiative with the Gates Foundation and the CDC to start a surveillance network. And if anyone is interested in that, that's one area. And more broadly, I think right now for me personally, I'm really interested in sort of thinking about how large companies are going to respond to the coronavirus in the future, and sort of how is the coronavirus going to be an impetus for various kinds of enterprise companies. So, and the particular problem is, I think there's a lot of sort of information asymmetry. I myself used to work in consulting at McKinsey, and when it comes to access to how much information folks have in terms of what is the automobile industry response economically to something like the coronavirus right now, and how do you sort of deliver this kind of high impact information to folks out there. So, yeah, anyways, lots of ideas I'm happy to share.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Yeah, this is awesome stuff. All right, so next I would like to have Konstantin Buehler. He's a GSB alum, and he also did an MSCS at Stanford. And he has a lot of really important insight that I'd love him to share.
Hey everyone, my name is Konstantin Buehler. Thank you, Josh, for organizing this and for calling me in. It seems like you've got a great group together here. I see 50 people on the line, which is really impressive. Congrats everyone on being admitted to the GSB. When I graduated from the GSB in 2016, our dean said at the graduation ceremony, "Congratulations everyone, you did something really hard. You got into the Stanford GSB." And that was when we'd finished. So the hardest part is done. Welcome to Stanford and the GSB, and you're gonna have a really great couple years ahead. Sorry that COVID kicks this off. It's not a fun start to everything. I feel particularly bad for those who would be having graduation and just an amazing spring quarter. So to all those, my condolences. It's a special time and special community. I was GSB class of 2016. Afterwards, I worked at Meritech, and now I'm a partner at Sequoia Capital. And one thing that I've seen consistently is that when there are times of difficulty, it's the opportunity for people like you all, members of the GSB, to really help others. And that's what I've been moved most by Josh when he's telling me about this. I think that there are a few ways to be really helpful. Some of you may have seen the Sequoia Black Swan report. And again, I'm speaking from my own perspective, not on behalf of Sequoia. But one of the things that it points out is that businesses mirror biology. And Darwin once says, the businesses that, or the really organisms that survive are not the strongest or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable to change. And that's very true in business as well. We've seen that time and again. So I think as you guys embark on this endeavor, there's a few ways you can really help. One is you all are very adaptable to change as bright, next generation GSB students, business leaders, computer scientists, and you can build businesses that have adapted to the changes that we're going to have as a society and civilization. The second is you can go in and help businesses that aren't ready for change. A lot of these small businesses are run by small business owners who have been doing their same type of business for a long time, years, maybe decades. And they're wonderful people who are doing really valuable things for society, but they've chosen to do what they're doing in part because they don't want the constant change and vicissitudes that we might have in our career paths. So a lot of businesses are a lot more brittle to this kind of change. And so a second way that you can come in and really help is just by helping businesses that are more brittle and helping organizations that are more brittle adapt to that change. And actually, I want to focus on this point for a second because I think that that's actually where the biggest value can be created. I think that a lot of the existing infrastructure in the economy and existing infrastructure in terms of not-for-profits have a lot of good in there and a lot of potential, but they haven't been able to adapt to change as well. And you all as change makers might have an amazing opportunity to help them adapt effectively. The third way is information flow. Information is particularly important in times of change. You all have access to information that's relevant, and I think that the Slack channel that Josh is going to make is going to be really helpful for you sharing information amongst this group, and that's going to help each of you help your organizations adapt accordingly. So congrats to all of you again on the GSB and on Stanford community, and thanks Josh for organizing. Pleasure to be a part of this community, and let me know if I can be of help.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Konstantin. Yeah, and also I'd like to be very conscious of Max's time. He's taking time out of his work to come and speak with us and ideate with us. And so Max is going to talk about the medical perspective.
Right, hi everyone. Apologies if the signal's not great. I'm on a mobile phone. So I'm Max. I'm a surgical resident based in London, England. And I'm joining all of you guys in the summer, along with my wife, who's also going to the GSB, and she works in impact investing. So I just thought I'd take a few moments to tell you what the situation is in the UK, what it's like on the front line, and a little bit about some issues which we're seeing which could be solved, but are sort of out of our remit as doctors, but also some things which we're doing as a group of clinicians here to try and move things along. So the UK has been on lockdown since basically last Monday, when they said people can only go out for essential things, but we're still allowed outside. There's no sort of law stopping that or anything at the moment. We've effectively, surgical residents like myself, we've been taken away from surgical jobs, and they've stopped all elective and cancer surgery, and put us all onto effectively special COVID wards, because there are so many COVID patients coming through now that every single bed in the hospital is basically COVID. We're not quite at capacity yet, which is a good thing. And part of the reason we stopped all that surgery is because after an operation, someone stays here for a long time, which is then blocking a bed for someone who potentially comes in with COVID. In addition to that, we've basically turned other parts of the hospital into more intensive care beds. We've ordered more ventilators and basically getting the hospital ready in every way in which we can. I think some things have struck me about what's happened. I'll sort of try and go through those as systematically as I can. So, I mean, the first is that we've got the primary effects of COVID. So this is what happens to the people who are going to get it, and what's going to happen to them. But then there's a lot of secondary effects, both within healthcare, but also outside of healthcare. So what I mean by that is the fact we've stopped all surgery here so that we can build capacity and we might be able to treat the disease and people coming with that. But as a result, there's a whole bunch of people with cancer. There's a whole bunch of people with appendicitis. There's a whole bunch of people coming in with trauma. This is a trauma center here, who aren't getting any treatment, or are getting suboptimal treatment because we're having to make trade-offs. And when we get over the peak of COVID and we sort of clear the initial wave that's coming, it's not just going to be about what we can do for the people who had COVID. It's also going to be, what are we going to do about all of the people and the patients who are displaced because of COVID? Because we're going to spend the next year, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but part of a research group here at my hospital, which is Imperial College, has been running some modeling, and they say it's going to take 1 to 2 years just to catch up with the other operations we're going to need to do. So how does the system work with that? Is one thing we're thinking about. And then the other, I guess, is sort of the primary effects of COVID. So what's happening to these patients? What research can we do? How can we get that to work? And a lot of that is sort of out of our hands. You know, there's some big pharma, there are some research groups all running trials into it. And a lot of, from that medical point of view, the ball is rolling, right? There's a lot of stuff going, a lot of people looking into it, there've been trials launched, and some really exciting things are happening. But one of the main problems we've actually come into in the hospital is not how do we treat the really sick ones, because we've got these amazing people really looking into that. But right now, the ward which I'm on, which is next door, has got about 18 patients on it. And of those 18 patients, about 16 of them are ready to go home, but they can't because they've got COVID, and they might give it to their family, or they might give it to someone there, or more importantly, we could send them home, but they're elderly, they have other problems, they can't necessarily care for themselves. And there are no carers in the community because all of the carers are off self-isolating, or they might be scared because of misinformation. So actually, they're occupying a £400 a day hospital bed, as well as sort of vital capacity, which someone else could need. When all they really need is, if we could reallocate some of the hospitality workforce, for example, who are currently not in work, to help these people get home sooner with appropriate personal protective equipment or training, that sort of thing. That could actually be something that would super help us. You know, we've sort of onto the ventilator problem because that's in our control, and I'm sure I've heard a lot about what's happening in the US about that. But actually, there's so many factors which are blocking our ability to build capacity, which are outside of our control. How do we get people out into the community to do social care, that sort of thing? So I think I've probably talked long enough. I'll just quickly close by talking about a couple of the academic things that are running out of Imperial. So we have a vaccine trial running, which is in a department far away from mine, with people far more intelligent than me. I just focus on cutting things out. We're running a lot of computer modeling, working big data, and some machine learning algorithms which try to help us risk predict what will happen to these COVID patients. Should we be operating on people if they have cancer and COVID, or, you know, because a lot of these people are catching it when they come into hospital or with healthcare professionals. And we're also, my particular area of interest and what I've been looking into is what's the effect on workforce. You know, a lot of us, like myself, have been moved from one job to another. We're working a different shift pattern. We're not there yet, but we're about to see an awful lot of patients who in other time, we would have been able to offer intensive care to more, higher levels of treatment. And instead, what may well happen is that when all of these patients come at once, purely because of capacity effects, we're going to have to make some really difficult decisions. And that is in itself going to have an effect on workforce. So how can we look after workforce? How can we promote workforce well-being? How can we build resilience into the employees, but also the system as a whole? So that's what I'm interested in. So a bit of a ramble, and I apologize, not very well structured, but I'm sure Josh has a good idea of the agenda, but if anyone wants to ask any questions or talk about it, then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Max. Yeah, this was super insightful. Yeah, and it's becoming more clear to me. I feel like people like you have such deep experience in specific areas. It'd be great to have like an ideation office hours with folks. So I'll get back to you guys on that later. Awesome, Nancy. Would you like to speak a little bit about technology entrepreneurship in this age of COVID-19? Let's see. Oh, I think you might be on mute. Oh, wait. It says, oh, it looks like the connection might not be. Oh, interesting. Huh. Okay. Sounds like Nancy's connection might not be might not be working correctly. That's all right. Let's see. In that case, let's just move along for now. We can speak to Nancy about this later. Julieta, would you like to talk about mental health?
Sure, mental health and a little bit about geography also, as Danielle was mentioning before. So I wanted to talk specifically about this. Yesterday, actually, we talked with Danielle about this. So today we have in this call people from different geographies and different backgrounds. So we just wanted to be mindful that maybe priorities, solutions, and their implementations can vary a lot across different geographies. Let me give you a small example here in Argentina. Like 90% of businesses are SMEs. So that's why I said before I was also interested in local SME support. So they are responsible for nearly like 70% of registered employee. And last year, their debt to the tax authority increased 77% like year on year. That's including inflation, of course. So what we have here in Argentina in the private sector economy is a huge problem of working capital. So in the next few days, 90% of the companies in the economy are going to struggle to pay salaries, to pay their suppliers, and of course, to pay taxes. Added on that, the macro situation, of course, is very fragile. The government estimates that they have already spent like $1.2 billion on direct money transfers to vulnerable groups because of the quarantine. So what we have is a government that is in a very fragile situation and probably is not going to be able to collect money at the same pace that it was collecting revenue before, and has no spare change. So going into venture building specifically, of course, supporting SMEs is a priority in the agenda here. So basically, and adding to what Konstantin was saying before, like how can we help them transition their business into the online world, right? So that they have the revenue going on. For a cash-based economy also, what are the opportunities regarding digital payments and economic and electronic money transfers? And also adding on what I was telling you before about working capital, how can we make lending also available to SMEs, right? So long story short, this was one of the things that I wanted to tell you about. I do have an idea regarding like how to mix supporting local SMEs with digital socializing in mental health, but we just wanted to be mindful that maybe there are different solutions, as I was telling you before, that cannot be implemented worldwide. So maybe when we do team formation, we can be mindful of that and have them as diverse as possible. So that's from my end. Josh, I give you the word again.
Awesome, thanks so much. Yeah, this is super critical. Let's see. Nancy just messaged me that she is wanting to go next. Okay.
Hey Josh, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome, cool. So I think broadly, Konstantin mentioned a lot of the points that I am also interested in. I'm going to actually turn off my video because I think my connection is not too good. So I think right now in the current situation, I think the coronavirus itself has become a sort of black swan event where there's a number of things we can do that are sort of table stakes in terms of providing people access to medical resources in the current situation. And what I would challenge all of you to think is to think beyond that and think about how do we actually not just think about responding to coronavirus, but how do we think about repairing the situation after it's over, and how do we think about using this as a potential impetus to start renovating or building new sort of technological innovation as a result of the coronavirus itself. And so a couple of areas that I am particularly interested in. The first is I think there's two broad opportunities right now, given the current situation. The first is sort of in building better responses in the healthcare ecosystem, and more particularly in sort of biological networks, and how can we sort of think about global surveillance and infectious disease responses. And I think there, if anyone is interested in this particular line of work, there's several folks at Stanford in the genetic space as well as in industry who are pursuing ideas here, everything ranging from, I know there's one big project that's going on over at between sort of the Gates Foundation and a number of genetic sequencing companies that are looking at building out a sort of global network in Rwanda, Kenya, the US, and a bunch of international countries, and setting up sort of sequencers inside hospitals, and then building surveillance detection for new infectious disease outbreaks and being able to monitor them very rapidly through sort of a government coordinated response. The second area, which I think is particularly interesting for those who have more of a background in sort of the technology space and are potentially interested in sort of technology, entrepreneurship, et cetera, is this idea of how do we think about in sort of these critical events, providing access to really high quality information, and how do we help sort of, I'm sure there's a lot of consultants in this group right now who are very qualified to think about this problem in terms of how do we help, for example, enterprises get access to information on sort of changes in the automobile industry or economic volatility in a time like right now, and what does that information look like and how can we gather it? And I think there's a number of advancements right now that are going on in sort of the technological aspect in the technological landscape with AI, which is more of my background in terms of how do we use natural language processing techniques? How do we use AI to start think about scraping all of the Twitter accounts online or getting access to sort of large scale databases from places like Bloomberg and think about how can we predict different economic changes, or how can we deliver this information to consultants who may be using this to guide industries like the automobile industry or sort of healthcare practices in better responding to these kinds of situations. And I think fundamentally there is still this large information asymmetry that exists when it comes to market research, and how can we sort of bridge this gap. So those are two areas that I think are exciting opportunities, and then more broadly, I think right now there's with all of these events, there is, like Konstantin mentioned, an impetus for potential new innovation and sort of technological disruption that arises, and if any of you are interested in sort of broadly engaging technology, potentially using AI to solve some of these problems in more of a longer scale concept beyond COVID-19, please talk to me and hopefully we can come up with some cool ideas together. Thanks, and thank you, Josh, so much for organizing this.
Of course, thanks so much for joining. It's really awesome to have you aboard, and you have really deep insight into computer science and artificial intelligence, and that's really, really critical in this time. All right, let's see. Danielle, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, sure thing. So we were chatting, Julieta, Anika, Josh, and myself were chatting yesterday, and as I mentioned before, we have, at least on my end, two big objectives of this, which is how we can create solutions that positively impact people, and second, how we can create a sense of community even before we're on campus. So in that sense, what we want to do is better understand, first of all, what your skill sets are, what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and within the context of COVID, what you guys want to focus on, because we might have big differences there. The second thing that we want to understand is what you can bring to the team and how you can get well on with others, so we can figure out the best way to assemble these teams. The third is if you want to actually be set up into teams, because we understand that perhaps some of you want to take some discussions offline and create your own teams, but we want to give you the possibility of us helping you create a team that we think is going to be complementary. And in that sense, something else that's important to us is understand what your background is, not only, as I mentioned before, in terms of skill set, but also in terms of geographical background, so where you're from originally and where you're living now, so we can have diverse voices in the room. And then the last part is, the way we look at this is that we're the first row of involvement, but we understand that we all have really cool and relevant networks that we can leverage for this. And I think Josh has showed it very strongly right now with so many people that he's been able to get join the project on the call. So we want to better understand who you have in your network who could potentially help us out, who could add value, and what your biggest interests are in terms of COVID. So what we're going to do in that sense after the call is over is we're going to send you a survey. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to complete, but it will really help us out to understand where you're at right now, and also how much time you have, how much you can invest. When I was at Admit Weekend, a lot of the Latin people that I talked to told me that as soon as they got their bonus in early April, they were going to quit. So if that's your situation and you have a ton of time and you want to contribute a lot of time to this, that's great. If you're still working like myself and perhaps you don't have as many hours, but you still want to be a part of it, we'd love to have you as well. So just to better understand what your needs are, what your skill set is, and what your background is will really help us out. So when the call is over, we'll send that over so you guys can fill it out, and then we can figure out next steps from there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danielle. All right, let's see. Ben is also going to talk about funding and capital and support during this time. Ben, would you like to take the floor?
Oops, sorry, you hear me? It's fine? So, hey.
Yeah, you're good.
I can put the camera, but I'm just holding my phone, so sorry for that. Okay, hey, so I'm French, based in London, so currently working in a distressed kind of hedge fund, and we are seeing like an astonishing number of companies which are getting short of cash. So you see them basically drawing every single lines, but just to pinpoint that this crisis, any company which is a bit which has been a bit undermanaged in the past, or technically any company in which you had private equity owners who bought it with a crazy amount of leverage, and basically just counting on growth to pay the interest, you will see a tremendous amount going in being in bad situations. So it may give also a lot of opportunities to turn around companies, but it also raises a considerable question about basically how to provide those companies with cash. I think going forward, the key preoccupation of companies will be to manage better the cost, because you see a tremendous amount. I mean, in France, it's less the case, given in France, in the UK, for example, you have the state is just paying, allowing the company to send all the staff on temporary layoff, and basically then pay the temporary layoff 80% of the wage. But it's not the case for every country. So you will see a tremendous amount of companies thinking how to rationalize their costs, but not firing people, but I mean basically managing better, having more variable costs, thinking that such a pandemics that we are seeing at the moment may come back. If you read the many reports, they say that we should not consider that this basically confinement as a one-off, but it may rehappen in the future at different times. So companies are very mindful of that. And yeah, that's a very interesting, so on a consulting standpoint, helping companies on finding ways for companies to basically lower their cost. Maybe many companies are discovering that people can work from home. So technically, even how to cut rents to send people home, to make them work from home. So there's all those situations on the consulting standpoint, but also on another standpoint is basically how to consistently provide successful company with short cash, with line of cash going forward, because it's one of the key issues we're seeing at the moment. Is many companies just not being able to pay the bills about the past 3 months. Is not only in Argentina, the same happened in the UK or France.
Thanks so much, Ben. Yeah, definitely. That's a critical problem. Let's see. All right. And finally, can we have Andrew, if you're here? Andrew has started a website in Malaysia that has been doing some wonders and has gotten some incredible traction. So I'd love to have Andrew speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So hi, guys. I'm going to tell you 3 things today. 1 is who I am. 2 is what I'm interested in. And 3, I'll show you my website. So I'm Andrew. I'm an MBA 0. I'll join you guys this fall at Stanford. Right now, I'm a student at the Kennedy School. So I'm interested in the interplay between government and business. And prior to this, I was a consultant. I worked across Africa, Asia, and Europe. And specifically, I was part of the one of the consultants that helped deliver the post-Ebola recovery program in Sierra Leone. So I wasn't there for Ebola, but I was there after Ebola, and the stories that you hear that I heard really inspired me. And this is a parallel. This is a corollary, right? So what I'm really interested in is is one, how to use tech to improve society, like a lot of us have said, but also 2, I want to challenge us to think of what is the proper role of government. 1, 2, the private sector, and 3, civil society, because we know all of them have their roles and the pros and cons. Government has scale, but sometimes it's slow in terms of developing countries, for example, for procurement. There's a lot of bureaucracy. Can civil society feed into this gap? That's what I've been working on right now. So I'm gonna show you a bit of my website. Screen, sorry. Can you see this? Can you see the website?
Yeah, I can see.
Cool. So the website is basically kitajagakita.com. It's a one-stop platform to organize and structure all of the mutual aid initiatives in Malaysia. What we see right now is in COVID-19, there's a lot of initiatives springing up from civil society. What everyone wants to like help and do something to show that we're doing something against the thing. So the gap that we saw was that there's too much information and people were getting confused about what is the difference between initiative A and B. Search costs are pretty high, so how do you filter and make sense between different projects, initiatives, NGOs? So we basically collected and collated and filtered and structured all the initiatives into one stop shop. So if you need help or want to help, you just click this and you have a list of all the initiatives which are working on stuff. If you want to donate cash, you can click on cash, and then you get a filtered list of all the initiatives that need cash. So for example, right? And specifically, we focus on the edge cases, which our government doesn't focus on right now. So refugees, the underemployed, the low income, the elderly, and we highlight these. And our website is a way of helping the average well-meaning citizen who wants to help but doesn't know exactly how to make sense of the ecosystem outside. So right now we've been pretty successful. We've had, I think, 21,000 visitors across 5 days and lots of media coverage. We're wondering if we can scale this up and happy to hear your feedback. And this is a pretty low-tech solution to what we see, what we thought of as a problem, and this is pretty replicable in other communities and countries. So we're happy and proud to have done this.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I think this should be like sort of the front page of the internet during this time for respective countries, definitely. All right, now I would like to go on to think about other topics that we're going to be potentially implementing in this initiative. And so I'll hand the baton over to Anika to introduce these topics.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So we actually, in Germany, we had a hackathon last weekend organized by the German government and the organization of another incoming GSB student, Andre. For some of you might have met him already. And that was actually like a super cool project. And the team did like an awesome job in collecting all the challenges that are out there that like different groups might be able to solve. So that was the list we had sent around ahead of our call this evening. And we have grouped that basically into 6 broader topics that we can work on in specific groups. And our main goal was to really like find topics that match our different skill sets. So really different on like what are your backgrounds? So are you more interested, like do you come from a technological background, have experience in actually building technological solutions? So are you more, like interested in legal questions or societal questions? Also, basically, some of the topics are a bit more long-term. So are really going to like into the question, how will society change after the crisis? Others are a bit more short-term, like how can you really find immediate solutions for companies that might need like support? So maybe we can just quickly go over the 6 broad topics, and I will mention like a few of the examples or questions within each topic. And like the list is really by no means complete. Because we are definitely conscious that there are more questions, more challenges depending on different countries. So definitely like this should come up, like we should discuss these questions, we should add, but so basically our first big topic is the allocation of workforce and services, which basically means finding like an effective and efficient way to match employers that are really needing staff, for example, in supermarkets, also in hospitals, with like available employees that, for example, just lost their jobs on the one side, or are also students and are sitting at home at the moment and can really contribute their skills. Or, for example, like find volunteers quickly and allocate them efficiently to organizations that might need them. So one big issue in Germany is like our food bank equivalent, because for example, in the food banks, I would say globally, you would have first, you have a shortage of actual donations because people are like stocking their food. And secondly, you don't have volunteers. So how can you solve this issue, for example? Or also how can you, like what Julieta, for example, spoke about already, like how can you provide vulnerable groups with support? For example, domestic violence victims that are now basically stuck at home, and or homeless people, refugees. The second big category we had were the medical questions, what, for example, Max was talking about earlier. So how can you optimize, or like in protest speaking, how can you optimize the testing process? How can you facilitate the digital diagnosis? Yeah, how basically can you transmit information in hospital capacities, among others? Yeah, and many more questions around that. Then the third topic is what Nancy already touched upon, which is the flow of communication and information. So one really important first point is, of course, like how can you detect and prevent fake news, especially like in times of crisis. There are so many information floating out there that is just not correct. And how can you really prevent that? And then how can you really efficiently communicate the general information, like to smaller companies or like just the general population? Then the fourth bucket we had goes into direction of the local businesses, the smaller businesses. What can you do there? For example, just to speak about the case we have in Germany, we have so many government support at the moment, but you have to submit a ton of forms. So you have to fill in certain forms to actually get access to the funding. And a lot of the small companies don't really know how to do that, right? They don't really know, like in the first place, what help is out there and what they need to submit, like which forms to get access to that help. So how can you make it more accessible for them, for example? The fifth point then goes in the direction of the digital socializing, which is a more short-term like issue. So basically, how can you optimize e-learning processes? What can you do at home to really stay connected with others, to socialize, to not be lonely at home? And then the sixth big topic is like more the long-term topic around the scientific or legal questions around that. So, for example, what are the lessons learned out of that crisis? And how can we prevent like the failures or basically the mistakes we made during this crisis, like for next time? So how can we make our system more resilient to address issues better? In a second way as well, there are a lot of questions, around like how can you protect democracy or democratic values in these times when a lot of states have issued these states of emergency. So how can you make sure that these checks and balances systems that are really critical to certain, to the political system is still kind of preserved? And the third big topic is around data. So how can you still ensure data protection with certain tracking systems you might think about? So that was, for example, a question we had at last week's hackathon a lot. So there were a lot of brilliant solutions around how can you track infected people, but then how can you track disease? But on the other side, it still needs to, like make sure that, like privacy, right? So basically your data is somewhere protected. And then, yeah, so like the last point is then basically the impact on the economy. So for example, how can we make better and more accurate predictions about the impact that this crisis has on our economy also long term, like over the next years? Yeah, these are really just some of the questions that came up. And of course, yeah, feel free to always add. Thank you. So back to Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, these are all some really great points, and I really want to thank Anika for compiling these, and it's been a great sort of like launch pad for our ideas. Now for the next steps, there are several things to discuss. We're going to be pushing out a survey form, as Danielle mentioned, and it's going to be very, very quick. We'd love it if you all filled it out so we could start to match teams. Likewise, if you want to, you can start DMing each other on Slack and connecting with team members. We just want to be here for you. We want to facilitate the formation of new teams. We are going to be hoping to put on some webinars and some talks for people who are really, really knowledgeable about this area. The more we can learn from them, the better off we'll be. And we're going to be putting out also, in that same vein, a call for speakers and content. So if people, have people in your network, if you have content that you'd love to share, please let us know. Do us all a favor. We would love to benefit from that. As I was going through this call, people have so many really interesting and deep experiences. I'd love to have some sort of office hours, virtual office hours with folks who are really deep in a space, or at least just like breakout sessions with specific topic areas so people can ideate within a subtopic. And so we're going to convene, and if you have ideas and suggestions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on that. And like I said at the beginning, this is, I mean, pieces are moving very fast, but they're all coming together as well, specifically for us. People are going to have more time to work on super impactful ventures, and like this era is completely unprecedented. Like no one has any experience with this. It's totally new, and we have an incredible opportunity to really have a super important impact on the world, even before our GSB experience, and that will even further enrich our GSB experience while we go there, and we'll be able to work on these ventures and take what we've learned. I'm hoping that people will look back on this and say, you know, these are the people that saved the world. That's my hope. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone deeply for coming. It's been amazing so far, and I know we're going to continue to do great things together. And please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the organizational members that I introduced before if you have any questions, and really looking forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
Josh, before we zoom out, I wanted to tell everybody about that conference that I told you, Anika, and Nancy. Well, I'm sure Nancy already knows, and Danielle. Stanford and the Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence are having a conference on April the 1st from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time. The conference will touch on understanding on COVID, but also on artificial intelligence and how they touch, like how can we use artificial intelligence for diagnostics, tracking, forecasting, information, and like how to see the broader impact in the economy. So I am going to post the link on the Slack group. It's free and open for everyone. So if you want to join, if you have time available, as Danielle said before, maybe we can all learn a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rita. All right, everyone. I'm going to remain on. I think some of the org members are also going to remain on if anyone has questions. Otherwise, you're free to go, and we'll send out that form soon.
And also, if anybody has some last thoughts to share, we'd be happy to hear them as well.
Yes.
If not, thank you very much. It's a nice meeting you all.